It's kinda hard to get through October without playing at least one Castlevania game. But which one? Well, I recently picked up a physical copy of Super Castlevania 4, one of the two Castlevania games on the 16-bit SNES. I think we have our choice. Super Castlevania is a retelling of sorts of the original game, in which you play Simon Belmont on his way to defeat the master vampire Dracula and save the world and all that jazz. Simon takes his trusty whip and goes through the countryside and castle itself to slay the man. One of the first things you'll probably notice is how much the controls have been improved. Simon is no longer restricted to whipping in one direction. Now, he has all 8 directions to attack in, and believe me, this is long overdue. Airborne threats aren't the biggest danger anymore since you can strike creatures down from any angle. In addition, Simon has this weird limp wrist sort of thing where he lets the chain of the whip fall to his side. You can then press directional buttons to flop it around, doing some minor damage. This may not seem entirely useful, but there are some areas that it does come in handy, such as when you are on stairs and need to attack something below you. Just get close, dangle the whip, and let the enemy defeat itself. Side weapons are back with a vengeance, and these are easier to use as well. No longer do you need to press up and attack to throw a dagger or axe. Nah, this is the SNES controller. We're high tech now. We have buttons! So simply press R and your weapon of choice will be used. They do still require that odd heart ammunition though. Seriously, what is the purpose of hearts being used as ammo? Who thought of this and what was the meaning behind it? I am actually kinda curious about this. Anywho, the controls aren't just improved on the offensive side of things. You can now control your jumping trajectory. It's not a case of look before you leap otherwise you'll probably die that you'll run into with the NES trilogy. In Super Castlevania 4, because Simon is now Super Simon, he can alter his path in midair, making platforming a bit less stressful. Now you'll only have a stroke on about 10% of the jumps you have to make. Here's another new technique you have at your disposal that makes death a bit harder to come by. You can maneuver on the stairs a bit easier. That is to say, you're not stuck on stairs like glue once you start going up or down them. Here, you can decide to leap on and off of the stairs. This is actually required in one of the final stages, in which you have to jump onto stairs or even go from one set of stairs to another. This level is pure hell, but that's besides the point. With all of these control improvements, you may find that Super Castlevania 4 is much easier than its older brothers. There aren't as many hazardous instant death pits, although they do exist. Simon still bounces back when hit, so you do need to show at least a bit of care when near pits. Bosses can usually be taken down by spamming secondary weapons and outwhipping the enemy. In an interesting yet welcome design choice, some of the bosses appear in the middle of the stage as opposed to the very end. And if you are having trouble, there are infinite continues and a password system that resembles Mega Man games, in which you get a grid and icons to place on them. I forgot how annoying it is to write down these styles of passwords on paper like we had to do as kids. Battery saves or our friends. Now, I say that the game is easier, but it's still not a pushover. There are some segments that will give you grief, mostly in the final parts of the game. The library has you jumping on massive flying tomes that change direction when they want to. There is a corridor of constantly elevating platforms that are lined with spikes. And again, B2 wanted me to tear the rest of my hair out, as you have a rotating blade that is chasing you, and if you don't hurry, it'll slice Simon into 2 pieces. But not only are you hauling ass, but you are also navigating stairways that crumble after you touch them. There were many times where I had to let myself die because I jump onto a stair and it breaks before I can even start to move. It's a bit infuriating, sure, but it didn't deter me from finishing the game, which I did. And I gotta say, Dracula is actually disappointingly easy. The hardest part is the middle phase where he summons balls of flame to chase you down. Sure, I died a few times, but compared to Castlevania 1, he's much easier. Obviously, stepping up from 8 to 16 bits, you are going to run into graphical improvements, and Konami shined here. Right from the start, you get an eerie intro, complete with a shattering gravestone, moody fog, and a musical track to top it all off. It sets the stage perfectly, yet the game doesn't stop there. Simon starts in the courtyard to the castle, and has to traverse through the gardens, complete with iron fences that rise from the ground as soon as Simon steps foot on the grounds. Of course, being that it's an early SNES game, Castlevania 4 has to show off some Mode 7 effects. Some bosses use a scaling effect, like a large golem that changes size upon getting hit. There is this rotating room in which you need to grapple onto a hook with your whip and just hang around until the room stops spinning. There are these cool ghosts in the treasury, which I'm sure aren't Mode 7, but still looks cool. But the most impressive visual area of the game is this stretch here. I don't exactly know why the walls are spinning like a cylinder, but it's freaking cool to walk through. To make things even more frantic here, the platforms are breaking as you walk on them. Granted, they only break once you reach a certain part of the screen, so you aren't truly in any real danger, but the effect does a great job at making you feel hurried. If I was to have just one complaint about Super Castlevania 4, it's this. The audio portion of the game is kinda lackluster. I know there's going to be a lot of people that disagree with me, but hear me out. The NES trilogy has some of the best soundtracks of the era, and no one can really deny that. If you deny it, you're wrong. Just putting that out there. Anywho, Castlevania 4 seems to take a step back and go for more atmospheric than catchy. There are remixes of some of the more memorable NES tracks in the final stages of the game, but even with those, I still prefer the originals. Just not for me, I guess. But even worse, there are some weird sound effects that you'll be encountering. At times, death cries from some of the creatures feel like the developers just picked a random SNES sound effect. Not everything is bad though. The whip sounds satisfying, which it better be considering that you'll be hearing it a lot. There are plenty of grunts from Simon when he takes damage. It's just that the enemy effects occasionally seem like they don't belong here. Other than that minor gripe, Super Castlevania 4 is almost a perfect game. The difficulty scales fairly, the spooky theme of the franchise is upheld and improved upon, and overall, it's just a really fun game to play. The password system is also welcome, and yes, I'm aware that the first game is the only one to lack this, but Castlevania 4 is also a bit longer, so it's a bit harder to sit and play through in one sitting, although it's totally doable. If you're into the series, or horror-themed platformers, and haven't played a Castlevania game, 4 is a great place to start. Final score? 7 out of 7. Yes, I'm aware that I said the game is almost perfect. So I think I'd say it's a 6.5 due to my only complaint being against the audio, but if I round that up, 7. So there. This is Reaper. Happy fragging.